This is a walking session. So what you can do in preparation is you possibly need to put your shoes on. I would also suggest it would be easier if you want to go for a walk outside, which would probably be more interesting than a walk inside. Then perhaps you could grab your phone and your headset or your AirPods, whatever you need, and log into this Hopin register for the you don't need to register again, but log in there and join the conference on your phone for the next hour or so. So anybody who would like to join this session, I'll just repeat that for the people who are coming in, and then we'll get started in around about 2 or 3 minutes. So there's Volker.
Hi, Jane. The other session just ended, so I think it will take a few more seconds.
Okay. So I see some people have come over. So and I was just telling them that this will be a walking session. So I will not be sharing slides. I will be telling stories. So hopefully, as most of you communication people know, stories should be more memorable. We'll be talking about the topic, but in that way so that you can walk, which is a great idea. We decided when we were doing the session that, we had to walk the talk too. We couldn't say that we were having a well-being session where everybody just spent their entire time looking there. So yeah, I know I did some yoga this morning with Katja. So we're having this is this longer one where we'll be 50 minutes. So if you can go for a walk outside, so if you want to take time now to put on your shoes, it might be good if you can log in on your phone instead of on your laptop. I mean, you're most welcome to take your laptop for a walk if you've got a headset or your AirPods or something like that. It might be easier than carrying your laptop around.
Should I make that joke? But you need maybe to be a bit careful in Austria if you're carrying a laptop along, because that's normally what politicians do in Austria, and they are catched.
Right.
All the Austrians know that story.
Oh, now. Okay. Is there a good story there that it hasn't filtered over here to Switzerland then? So,
well, one of our ministers gave away his laptop while there was a police raid in his in his home. However,
okay, so somebody's
maybe you
walking
have a
around
long
the street.
cable,
Yeah.
or I think many people are working
Bluetooth
from home, exactly, Bluetooth speakers, or working from home, so you can turn on your speakers on your laptop and walk around in the building. I think that should work as well, and it should work also with the mobile. You can either log in with the mobile, or there is also an app that can be downloaded. I will put that link also into the chat. One second.
So I'll give people just a couple more minutes to get themselves organized. So I will go for around about 50 minutes or so. And it doesn't need to be anywhere special if you're going for a walk outside. Obviously, if you have a green space that you can go to a park or a garden, that would be nice. If you are inside, that's perfectly fine as well. You can go for a walk around and some of these exercises that we will do in between some of the stories that I will be telling, then it will also, you can do them inside as well. I actually had a meeting the other day. We're setting up for a wellbeing session that I'm doing on hybrid work with the guy, and the guy you could see he was doing this tour of his apartment. He was just walking around the entire apartment for this whole 20-minute meeting that I had with him. And he said that he ran marathons and that he just needed to keep moving. So I thought that was interesting. And I don't know how other people have experienced, but certainly working from home, it is quite a, if you have had a step counter or something like that, you will have possibly noticed that the number of steps that you do has really gone down. So I certainly noticed, I used to work at the step counter. One of the places that I worked at, I had a 10-minute walk to work. It had 7 flights of stairs, which I would climb up. And if I ran up and down between meetings, and if I went for a short walk to buy some lunch or something, and then I walked home for 10 minutes as well, I could get my entire steps in for the day without it needing to be that I'd gone out and done some exercise. And I think that can be one of the things to think about when it comes to well-being, is often people think about, oh, I have to start an exercise regime, or, oh, I have to really get into it. But if you can just integrate certain things into your everyday life, like a short walk now while we're doing a session, it can be good for your well-being as well. Good. I'm going to start now on the session. I could do a really quick introduction to myself. My name's Jane Piper. I'm an organizational psychology, and what I like to say is I help smart people work smarter. So I consult and coach with companies around topics around well-being, focus, and productivity. I'm the author of a book, Focus in the Age of Distraction, if you're interested in more topics around digital detox. In this session, I'm going to go through 3 main topics. I'm going to talk about wandering, which is not surprising since we're doing walking, but wandering and where we spend our time thinking. Oh, thank you, Volker. That's a copy of my book. It's lovely to see that you've still got that copy. Great one. And so I'm going to talk about both mind wandering and trusting our gut, and how we've got into that way of working these days. I'm going to talk a little bit about the time online, because that has whole shifted. I mean, there's this big myth about we should spend more time offline, which I think, as we've learned over the COVID era, really doesn't work. And I'm going to talk about switching off. And that is not turning the switch off, but mentally switching off as well. So hopefully you're out there and you're walking around, or perhaps you're pacing up and down in your office, or walking around your apartment, or perhaps in the garden or something like that. So what I would like you to do now is basically just think about this here and now. So there's not thinking about anything else apart from where you are in this time or place. And just trust your gut and go and look at something which attracts you. If you are outside and walking in the garden, did you move towards a particular flower? Did you move to a green area? If you're in your house, what attracted you? So just take a minute, take a deep breath, and just go somewhere just trust that gut instinct. Whatever attracts you, how you feel. Don't think about it, don't plan it, just go to where you feel. So I don't know if you want to pop in the chat where you might have ended up, what you've ended up looking at. Yeah. So feel free to share if you're able to there. And often what I want to talk about in this session, Nina says my books, and the other Nina says she's looking out of the window. So is often we spend a lot of time in this world overthinking, over-planning, overworking, and totally leading to being overwhelmed. I call this the overachieving syndrome. I mean, many of us will have got to where we are being good in our jobs by being well planned, by being well organized, by thinking through all the risks, by setting incredibly high standards for ourselves and our teams, and working hard towards goals and pushing ourselves just that little bit harder. But it is a hard and high standard to live up with, and it does lead, if it's not well managed, to high levels of stress. So somehow we've forgotten sometimes that we can also think with other parts of our bodies and not just our brains, and that we're thinking and we can trust our gut. So what attracted you, and do you think why? I can understand Samara saying the garden, that would attract me as well. I'm very much one, as you can possibly hear from my accent, not natively from here, originally from New Zealand, and somehow the outdoors was baked into the way. But it also, what attracts you, of what you enjoy, what you look at, what you find relaxing, and sometimes getting to understand those signals yourself. So I want to tell you my story. So I was working in an international company, a matrix organization globally all around the world, long hours, high stress. Pre-COVID, we traveled a lot. But I knew I had to do something about my stress. I was getting far too stressed. I wasn't sleeping well. People were complaining that I was bossy and over-organizing in at the time. When I was visiting family for holidays, my brother said I was trying to we were trying to decide what to do for the day, and my brother said to me, "Who appointed you the manager?" So yeah, I was not very relaxed, and I decided I needed to do something about it. In that way that if you've got a problem, find a solution to fix it. Well, my thought was I was signed up for a mindful-based stress reduction course, which I'm sure many of you have actually been on before, or you've heard about mindfulness. It's a very similar method around the world, an 8-week course, 1 evening a week, which here was between 7 and 9:30, quarter to 10 at night. A large part of the mindfulness-based stress reduction course is to meditate. And anyway, I wasn't good at meditating. So there was 45 minutes and meditation practice in the class, and then you went home and you practiced it. What was happening is even in the class, lying on a hard floor on a yoga mat, I was falling asleep. Same thing when I was practicing at home. So I went to see the yoga teacher, and I was really annoyed that I wasn't good at this, because I'm used to being good at things fairly quickly. Wasn't good, and it wasn't easy to meditate. Now, of course, she told me that it was a journey, and learning to meditate takes time, and different. She gave me some practical tips, like cooling down the bedroom, because it was the middle of winter, and they do get very stuffy with the central heating here. And she also said to me, don't stress about being stressed. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. Yes. Now I'm worried that I'm too stressed, trying to do something about it and stressing myself out about my own stress levels. It's a never-ending cycle here. I'm going to end up going down a negative well. Anyway, I'm practicing my meditation at home one evening. It's about 7 o'clock at night. And I'd left my phone out in the lounge, and I'm in the bedroom. And I hear my work phone ring. Rings once, okay, but you could still hear it. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, and I actually do wake up a bit there. Then I'm starting again. Then it rings a second time. And then it rings a third time. And then finally my husband comes into the room and he says, it's your boss. And he's rung 3 times. Perhaps it's something important. So anyway, I rang the boss back. It was Jaco's his name. I rang Jaco back, and was it something important? Was it that, the CEO had resigned, one of our top performers is going to the competitors? Was it somebody had died? Was it the company had gone bankrupt? Was it that the company had been taken over? I can't exactly remember what it was, but it was none of those things, which were life and death at 7 o'clock on a Friday night. And to add to that, my boss, he worked out of Finland. And so it was actually 8 o'clock at night at his time. He was driving home, and which was typical of him when he was driving home. It was a convenient time because he had a 3/4 hour drive. It was a convenient time for him to ring people. You didn't waste your time while you were driving. You could use the hands-free and have conversations with people about work. Great. So I just got unlucky, 7 p.m. But here I'm thinking, this is crazy. I'm trying to learn to be less stressed, and instead I'm finding myself being called up by the boss. So it was about this time I started thinking about this overachieving of this hours that we worked. And you might have thought it was just my boss, but it was a bit of a disease across the entire company. Everybody, there was a badge of honor about how busy you were. The busier you were, the more often you showed people that you were working late by sending emails, by phoning late, by doing ridiculous hours. That was sort of the way, the culture there. And so it made me realize that in some ways the stress, yes, it was my personal problem to deal with, but also it was the organization's way of managing things as well. Yeah, I can see Melanie's written me a chat. It's more convenient to talk to your parents on the train on the way home. I mean, it's a little different though than phoning your work colleagues, at 8 o'clock at night, basically, to talk to them. I mean, there's a difference. I see, I guess, and that was that the culture had got very much like that. Also, when I was thinking about that often in that culture, because they were incredibly busy, but it wasn't like the company was, you'd think, oh, well, you work for a big company, you get a big salary, that's what that's what you do the hard yards for type thing. But there was a lot of time where I don't think that there was a lot of reflection on. There was a lot of a culture of doing, and decisions were made in a very hip, shoot from the hip way, we say. And really weren't thought through. So there was a lot going on without a lot of reflection when I look back at that. But it was definitely much the culture there, but not just even for work, but also in private time. There was a youngish team of people on the board and then a management team, and everybody seemed to, the CEO ran marathons and of course talked about it. Other people were in ski marathons. I had a couple of guys in my team who were ex Commonwealth level rowers, huge guys, both of them. And so sport was important and important to relax, but sport also was a competition. I mean, it was like the talk in the boardroom was about, what are you going to do for the weekend, was, run 100 kilometers or do something like that. So this very active, action-orientated style. Some of the groups did this Tough Mudder. I don't know that people have heard about that, where it's sort of like this obstacle course where you crawled through the mud with barbed wire and all these sorts of things like that. It was very much a go, go, go. And one of the things is I realized I'd become the same. I was doing doing an MBA in my spare time between working. I was cycling over mountain passes, and I was getting annoyed with myself because I wasn't good at meditating. I wanted to learn it and do it and be good. So I realized I had to, in some ways, stop trying to be good at everything. And also take some time off, whether that would be meditation, but truly take time off. So in the weekend, rather than thinking I need to cycle over another mountain pass, I mean, I had a challenge where I wanted to cycle over every mountain pass in Switzerland, which I did. Then I wanted to cycle over every mountain pass in Italy and France and the French Alps as well, which, at that point I decided, okay, we're getting a bit crazy here. It's time to relax, when every weekend becomes a huge amount of effort. When do you actually take time to relax and take time off? So I'm going to stop chatting for now, having told you my story, and I'm just going to give you 1 minute to think about the question. Do you recognize that overachiever culture in your organization, where people are working all the time, and it's a badge of honor to be busy and to be working late? And do you recognize any of that overachiever in yourself, in your work, or even in the hobbies or sports that you do? So I'll give you 1 minute of silence to think about that. It's amazing, isn't it, how long 1 minute feels? You've been on all day now, probably, to this conference, or many of it, and 1 minute feels a long time. But it's one of these small micro interventions that you can probably do yourself also, is just take 1 minute out. It feels an incredibly long time. But it's amazing how quickly it helps readjust and rebalance us. So, final thought from just thinking about that is thinking about this overachiever syndrome. We often are overthinking, overplanning, overworking. So just notice when I asked you where to go, just based on your gut, that we actually do think in other places. we often say, think, the intuition, the gut. The gut is actually a very, where all the microbiomes live, actually send a lot of signals to our body about how we're feeling physically, if we're aware of those. But do we need to plan and think about everything? And sometimes that intuition is there for a reason, but in business, often we're taught to ignore that intuition because we have to share the facts, the figures, the numbers. So there's that bit also about, where do you trust your gut? When do you use it? And when do you rely on facts, figures, information? So hopefully you've been out there wandering, and you're wandering around out there or wandering in your house. And I'm going to move on to part 2 now. So I'd like just to ask you now to take a minute to switch on your senses. So look up if you can. If you're in your house, well, everybody can look up, sorry, but you can look up. Are you looking up into the ceiling? But if you've got the chance, perhaps to look out the window, look up at the sky. And just tell me what you notice. So if I look out my window, I'm seeing that the fog has lifted from what was a bit of a grey start this morning, and clouds and trees. If you're looking up at your ceiling, hopefully you're not noticing, like me, that I probably should have get rid of some spiders' webs in the corner. So have a look up, then have a look down and see what you see. I'm standing in my office, but yeah, I can see the wooden floor beneath me. If you're out walking, what can you see on the ground? Then another thing I'd like you to ask is just to look at something and look at it like you're looking at it for the first time. I often have visitors who come and, this was pre-corona, I have visitors from New Zealand, the family that comes over here to Switzerland, and it's lovely when you get the kids at just that magic age, 9 till about, before they decide to be cool. So it's not cool hanging around with the old, so it's like about 13 or 14. And they come and they can talk and they see stuff and they experience this and they go, wow, look at that. Now look at something that you've looked at for a long time and just look at it with a fresh pair of eyes, like you're a wondering child, and think, just what is some of the curiosity that sparks for you. So if I look out my window here, I have some trees that in the garden opposite of the church that grow those chestnuts. They've got the big thick spikes on them. The kids take the chestnuts. So, it's the pretty, what do you see? And it's like, yeah, can I see some chestnuts growing on the tree there and take pleasure in those things? Like a kid, what are you wondering about? Then to open up your other senses, try smell. What are you smelling at the moment? If you're outside, are you smelling grass? Are you smelling trees? If you're inside, what's there? Are you smelling somebody cooking your lunch? You never know. If you've got headphones on, perhaps it's a good time to just take one ear off and tell me what you can hear. If I take one headphone off, I can hear much more of the road noise and how loud my computer is whirring away. So tune into that sense as well. Touch, reach out and touch something that might be on your desk, or maybe it's something in your where you're walking in the garden or whatever. What have I got? Somehow it always feels cold and smooth, and it's water. So just feel something, touch something, grab it. And taste. I mean, taste doesn't just need to be eating. So what does the ear smell of? One of the things is, coming from New Zealand, we're very close to the ocean, and now living in central Switzerland, landlocked, is I miss the smell of the sea, but it's actually also a taste of the sea, where you get to I'm not talking about the Mediterranean, which is to me like a big bath, but where you get the big waves like on the Atlantic coast or the North Sea coast, and you can smell and taste that salt in the air. So what can you taste? So that's just tuning into the senses here and wakening up our awareness. Nina says she smells coffee and hears traffic. So yeah, what are you hearing? What do your senses, are they turned on? Because so often these days we're busy working on things that we spend a lot of time online looking at our devices and let them pass by. So there'll be no surprise to any of you to find that the amount of time we spent online over COVID went up. Meetings increased by 143%, which is an amazing amount of increase in time spent on meetings. Also, significant numbers of chats and emails. So we got totally involved in being online. It was the only option, from Netflix in your time off to working with your colleagues. But as we slowly and painfully, it seems at the moment, move ourselves out of those restrictions, it's time to start that question I like to ask is it time well spent? It's the times that you find that, you've suddenly spent 20 minutes on social media. And I know for many of you who work in the communications area, it's part of your job to spend time on social media. But you're there working, and all of a sudden the time just disappears. We get sucked in from time to time, or you're using it for personal purposes. And we also get sucked in very much by that vanity metric, likes and shares. How many people have liked the post, or how many people have shared it, whether that's for work and private. So the social media has been developed and designed that way, basically to keep you there. I mean, it's quite a simple equation. Apart from when you're paying for business packages, for most people who are using these platforms, Facebook or LinkedIn, they're free. You can't keep something for free. You're paying for it with your attention. And you're paying for it with your attention by losing time doing other things that might be time well spent. It also very much plays on this fear of missing out. The fear of missing out is something which is quite innately tribal, going back to the days when we, 200,000 years ago, were running around on the savannah and missing out on what others are doing. And it doesn't necessarily need to be online, but it is so much easier to post a photo of your fantastic holiday, your beautiful new boyfriend, your new car, whatever the case, which heightens our fear of missing out in some ways, but also creates the social comparison. The other week I was cycling up a hill here over to visit a friend who lives on the other side of the hill through the week, and I was cycling up there on a beautiful day. I was saying, I'm so lucky I'm cycling there. I'm going to go and visit a friend. She's working, so we were having a lunch together. I decided I'd cycle over there. It's about a 20-minute cycle, 20-minute back, a beautiful day. I'm feeling really lucky. I'm feeling great. On that hill also is the Dolder Hotel, which those who you live in Switzerland or the near have probably heard of. 5-star, really, really expensive hotel. Get $1,000 out just to stay there, 1,000 francs to stay there a night. Where the courses started at 100,000. So I'm biking up there, enjoying my way up the hill. Plus, I hear this boom, 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 boom coming behind me. Oh, there's a car, vroom. 1 Ferrari, boom, 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 2 Ferraris, 3, 4, 5 Ferraris go past me on their way and all turn into this beautiful hotel. I mean, you look at that and you think, here I was thinking I was lucky having some time off to visit, to see a friend. We'd been under lockdown for a while, great, and to have a nice lunch and to be sitting in the sun and to be cycling. And everybody, other people driving past in Ferraris. That's nothing on social media, but it plays into our social comparisons. So how do we, and then social media plays on it again and makes us feel like we're sucked in there and have to post our own stories there. Over this whole COVID time, however, Microsoft have been doing some really interesting work, and they've shown that this Zoom fatigue is real. So that's that feeling that you get after you've done 4 meetings in a row, and you have this, it's not a headache, or it's just you feel like, oh God, really, it just feels fried in the head somehow. So their experiment, they took 10 people, which is not a huge sample size if you're a scientist, but anyway, they took 10 people. On the first week, they gave them back-to-back Zoom calls for 4 hours. they measured their brain waves with ECG, and you can see these pretty colors. And by the end of the 4 hours, their brains are bright red in this ECG. 2 weeks later, they repeated the experiment, but this time it was a 55 minutes of meeting with a 5-minute break where they asked the people to do a little bit of mindfulness meditation, like what I was talking about earlier. What they saw is in the brain a lot cooler, a lot less of this high stress hormones in the brain. So basically, again, it comes back to the time that you spend online. It may be that you need to, we can't avoid it, but it's how you spend that time. Do you take a 5-minute break in between? Now, a lot of companies have put in, and what's interesting is a culture where they say meetings should be booked for 55 minutes, or if it's a half-hour meeting, for 25 minutes. And one of the clients I work for, they also have done that. They changed the automatic meeting scheduler, which normally would have scheduled meetings for an hour. They got IT to reprogram it, so the automatic scheduling goes for 55 and 25 minutes. And they create a culture where people can actually have that 5-minute break, because as I was saying before, it doesn't need to be sometimes a huge thing that makes a difference in a whole organization or a whole team to make their well-being seem better. I recently also tried a digital diet, which I thought was an interesting thing to see where I'm spending my time online. I was going away on holiday. I run now my own business. Oh, great. Thanks, Melanie, who said that we tried 45 minutes, but meetings keep running over, so we have some work to do on time management. Yeah, so the intention is there. You just need to drive a bit harder. The problem is that I feel there's almost a little bit, everybody's saying spend a little bit more time in your meetings actually talking to people, but when you do that, then actually meetings go a little bit longer. But really that magic 5 minutes in between meetings makes all the difference, I'm sure, for any of you who work back to back and Zoom calls most of the time, or video calls most of the time at the moment. So anyway, let me tell you a little bit about my digital diet and thinking about this concept of time well spent. So basically, I decided on the last holiday I've gone on for, it was that I can't do a complete digital detox. I'd have to have somebody come in and run my business for me for 2 weeks to handle some of the things that I was doing, and it didn't make any sense. But I still didn't want to spend a lot of time online. I was cycling through France and Italy, and I know, I'm sure like many of you, you've really relished your holidays after a few year of where holidays have been really difficult to be able to take a holiday where you actually go somewhere, you had more staycation. So I decided that it was 2 hours a day would be my maximum. So then I'm looking at what did I spend my time on, and it's interesting. I always found that obviously I took photos using the camera on the phone. I spend a lot of time since I'm cycling on Google Maps and Map Out, and quite frequently on things like Booking.com or TripAdvisor, all these things that you would expect to do when you're traveling on holiday. So it left a limited time for perhaps more of the social things. So it made me really think, did I need to post something on Facebook or LinkedIn? What I did notice, though, with taking that digital diet is that I still is that it was easier to cut back on the social media. That was less important than finding out those other facts. And I would send some emails to my close family, because I've got some of the ones who are over 80 who Facebook is still not quite on there. So it was easier just to copy everybody in on this email, even the younger generation, who are on Facebook. And it was interesting, I got a lot more responses than I would if I was doing it where I was posting something on Facebook. There you get a few comments and a few likes, but actually engaging with the content came a lot more with email. So it's interesting, do you see the return of email when you're dealing with a close group of people? I also noticed that I got into this sort of annoying habit of if I don't know something, of Googling it. Where previously, maybe you just let that curiosity wander and roam around in your head, so a bit of over preparation is like, if you're trying to book some accommodation, did you look at both TripAdvisor and Booking.com and the ratings on Google? And you think to yourself, oh, come on, how terrible is this restaurant or this accommodation going to be that, you need to read every rating? you're somewhere. Sometimes it is interesting to find out some facts. We were cycling along and there were these huge stands of trees, and I was like, which trees are those? I mean, sometimes it's useful to find out that information, but other times you might have asked somebody. The other week I was in a cafe out on the terrace, and there were 3 flags up there. My husband immediately goes to look into Google. I talked to the waitress and said, what are those 3 flags? I recognized one of them. And so she didn't know, so she asked one of the other guests that she did know. It was a small cafe in a venue in Swiss, in Andermatt. So one was the Uri flag, which I knew, but there were 2 others, which was the flag for the valley and the flag for this actual town. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it created a conversation rather than just always Googling it. And I'm thinking sometimes, yeah, but maybe we overuse that. I also noticed that I used the phone a lot when I was bored or without the digital diet would have done. And it's easy when you're cycling. We've got all the gear on the back in 2 big bags, and it's easier if one of you wants to go and buy some water or some food or go to the toilet or whatever the case may be, just to not have to lock all the bikes up and everything. So one of us is usually standing there next to the bikes. And it's very easy to pick the phone up and just start looking at something. And then with the digital diet, it made me realize, oh, okay, why do that? I can actually stare at these old men sitting here in the square having a great gossip. I can look at this, what's happening around there. One time, a whole van load of guys arrived who were clearly, they're all in the same polo shirt, obviously working for a company somewhere, and came and played pétanque over their lunchtime in this French village where I was waiting. So you see all these things happening that otherwise, if you were busy sitting down staring at your phone, yeah, maybe you're catching up on world news or something like that, but you'd also miss those things that you were going through and having a holiday to enjoy and see and experience. So for this section, really, the question I want you to think about when the next time you grab your phone is it time well spent? Do you need to do that? Is this how I want to spend my time? Because it's so easy to get lost in that rabbit hole or that rabbit warren. So now I want to move on to the 3rd and final section that I'm going to talk about here. And I'm going to talk about boundaries. So have a look around you and tell me a little bit about what boundaries you can see. If you are on the chat, drop it in there. But if I look out the window here, I look out at, on the boundaries, I can see where the road stops and somebody's garden starts. So it's a boundary. I can see some lines which create a boundary of where you're allowed to park in the street here. I can see that one car's slightly parked over the top of the boundary. Yeah, Nina says there's a railing on the balcony, to create a boundary that's a safety boundary in that case that, stops people falling off the balcony. Our lives are full of boundaries. The way our lives work to try and keep us safe, sometimes like the example that Nina gave of the balcony, or to mark out what is the time or space or place, like with the parking meter, the road out here, this is a space where you're allowed to park in these particular times. These boundaries, come very much part of our psyche over time. And we have them also inside our heads. Now, sometimes they're limiting beliefs or, mean that you don't think that you can go there or do something. Other times they create security and safety. And so the boundaries that we had about work were very much related to how we may shift in the time and space. They were, you went to the office, and in the office, that is where you worked. And that may have triggered the brain to go into the work mode and be easier to concentrate and easier to focus. You then traveled home. You might have had what we call a buffer zone, a time in between where you decompressed from work to home, as Melanie was saying, talking to her parents on the phone. So it was a bit of time on the train to decompress between one place and another. You arrive home, you're in a different mood than you are at work. You put on your comfortable clothes, you play with the kids, you cook dinner, you're in a different time and place. All of a sudden, bang, came COVID, and we're in a different time and space. and we're all working from home. We're all in the same time and space. So those messages, if you were working in your bedroom used to send you messages. This is the place I sleep. This is the place I relax. This is the place where I do other things that we won't mention on polite conversation. But then all of a sudden you've got a desk there on the corner, or, to start with the first few weeks, you might have even been sitting on the bed trying to work. So those spaces start coming with other meaning. And it made it hard. I heard from a lot of clients about how they were having trouble switching off. So it's about reclaiming some boundaries again, the tips that I want to share with you here, so that you can understand about how to, when you're working from home, some of the benefits that you can get from sort of reclaiming a boundary. Because they also help the mind of what's called attention residue. So when you are in a place which seems like a working space, it means the work part of the brain might be switched on. You start thinking about things. So the 3 boundaries I want to talk about are time, place, and space. So time, place, and space. Time, the time boundary. Certainly when we were working in the office, it was a much clearer time boundary. You went to the office at more a set time. Maybe you worked late, like I was talking about earlier, but there was a time where you were there, where it was work. I'm sure, like many people, maybe you took work home, but it was a different place than having it there. So one thing to think about is that time routine. I had a number of clients who said that they'd start working as soon as they got up by checking their phone before they'd even got out of their pajamas or had their shower or something, and then the day just spread all the way through to the evening where they were still doing the last email as well. So setting some time boundaries between what is working time. It doesn't have to be the first 15 minutes of the day. I do see that one of the things I would really recommend, if you find that that happens to you, is to buy an old-fashioned alarm clock so that you don't use your phone as an alarm clock, so you don't get those messages first thing in the morning, because it gives you, again, these 15 minutes, 15-minute spaces in your head before you're starting thinking about work. So it's a time boundary. A place boundary. I know it'd be lovely if you had your own office, and many of us do. That's great, but you can try and keep it in that place. If not, still trying to find a place where you would call your work place, and set it up as well as you can. And if you can't keep that place all the time, is basically to try and clear it away. So my husband works on the dining table. I claimed the office because I've been working here for many years. We found it was hopeless working in the office together, too much noise. So he's got the dining table, but for that he has a carry box where on Friday night, basically the computer, the monitor, the docking station, the papers, the pens, they all go into that. And then it's away off the dining table for the weekend, to give that sort of, it's no longer a workplace. It's no longer sitting in front of you seeing the computer. It's not so much a temptation of turning it on, but still seeing that work is there on the mind. And finally, the headspace, as I said, when I was talking about, there's a buffer zone as you move from one place to another place. Can be a buffer zone, or just a change can help you shift your thinking. So that's creating the headspace. For me, I grew up in New Zealand, in a rural area where we wore uniforms to school. So when we came home, because we were probably going out to do something, walk the dog or do some chores and things on the farm, we would change out of our school uniform and into old clothes, so we didn't get the school uniforms dirty. I still have that in my head so many years later, that what makes me feel like I finished my workday is to go and change out of my working clothes and put on some casual clothes, which seems a little strange when you're in the same house. And these days, basically I've heard of people still doing their work in their pajamas at any time of the day, but get that change from work to non-work, for me, sets the message that now it's time to relax a little bit more and stop that constant rethinking of work all the time. So I suggest for you to think about boundaries, think about boundaries in time and in place and in what I call the head space as well, how you can create boundaries between your work and your life, even if you are working from home. So those were the 3 stories I wanted to share you, 3 main points that we've covered today. We first talked about the overachieving syndrome, and then the second point, is it time well spent? How much time are we spending online? And then we've talked about boundaries. So I hope there's some ideas and thoughts as we've gone around. Hope some of you have been out there walking and been able to enjoy that and get your steps in time. Interestingly, so I started this was to get some ideas about how important walking was to mental health. And basically read some very interesting studies that said it's not just the grey matter, but also improves the white matter. And so the grey matter is what you might be thinking about, but the white matter is the elasticity of your brain, and whether you've got what sometimes is called neuroplasticity. It used to be thought that, our brains stopped growing as we got older. Somehow a magic number around about your 20s, your brain stopped growing, you had all the brain cells you need. But it's not true. They found much later research, but the myth still seems to exist, that our brains keep growing and we keep learning and over time, and can change how our brains are working. So this idea that, you have a fixed personality and a leopard never changes their spots or whatever the case, it is actually possible to change. It does take a lot of hard work, of course, but it is possible to learn to use your brain in a new way. And that often is the white matter, but they did show that in aging adults who are doing physical exercise, and that only needed to be walking. We're not talking about them going to the gym and doing a big sweaty workout or anything like that. That how it helped with aging so much to keep their brains active. Also, so it helps with what they call the brain plasticity, the neurogenesis. Exercise, I'm sure also walking is part of that as well, is about boosting the immune system, which has been high on everybody's list over COVID times, and the health benefits there. Reduces stress. You've probably been talking and hearing a lot about that today, but basically, one of the easiest ways to reduce stress is to actually do some exercise. So doing some exercise there. And yes, all that plasticity I was talking about is about creativity and idea generation. So over COVID times, I've heard stories from clients who have said that they've got treadmills in there, well, not treadmills, they had a stationary bicycle, and he would sit on his stationary bicycle. John would sit there on a stationary bicycle as he was listening to things like town halls or something like that, which were not so important. I have to say, as I was saying at the start, I had this meeting with somebody who was basically pacing around their room for 20 minutes. I found it slightly disconcerting to see this always changing. But if you're listening to a town hall where it's something that is being pushed at you, then basically sitting there doing your exercise or going for a walk is good. I had other clients tell me that they love doing these walking meetings, so that when they've been out and they've been doing some of those walking meetings when they've had a one-on-one with some of their team member, either virtually or sometimes even when possible, to actually have a face-to-face walking meeting in COVID times. But a great idea to continue even past COVID times. Well, thank you very much. I would like to say, there's a couple of comments here. So the lack of curiosity and learning that makes you old. You're so right. Walking with curiosity leads us to wondrous sights. Well, thanks for sharing that, Catherine, because I was going to ask a question of how people have found this walking. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments for those people who are there as we wrap up. So anybody else got any other thoughts? Good. Thanks, Christina, who says she's having a lovely session. Melanie, who says, not been walking, but have really enjoyed. Well, thank you very much, Melanie. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. I'm sorry you're not able to get walking, but I hope perhaps for some other sessions today or something else that you were able to get that movement in. Anyway, Catherine again, it's interesting we walk with friends and people we love as a way to connect from the heart. How lovely to take that into the workspace. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? Yes, because I mean, I do hiking, snowshoe walking with the Swiss Alpine Club, and I am, you know, I'm sure many of you have heard that the Swiss can be quite formal and polite, and so I'm always amazed when you go hiking with a group like that, how open and friendly people are. I'm not sure whether it's a self-selection or actually, as you say, with actually when you go walking with somebody, it is a different connection that you're having. And a good idea to bring some of those thoughts into our workplaces. We try and help people to be mentally healthy, well, and engaged and productive. Any other thoughts from people? Good. Well, thank you so much for participating. This has been an experiment. This is the first time I've done this. I'm going to drop in the chat if any of you would like to catch up with me. I'll put my LinkedIn profile. Join me there. I also, Volker, thank you, did a wonderful post plug for my book, so I'll do a quick one here at the end. If you can see that, I'm not sure, but you can also buy a copy of my book, Focus in the Age of Distraction, there. So, but mostly I love talking to people. Lockdown's been a complete pain in the butt for me, so I'm going to pop my LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn address there, just bringing it up now, and really look forward to connecting with anybody who was on this session here.
Great. Thank you, Jane, for this lovely session.
Yeah. Well,
it was really wonderful.
Something different, as I said, we were trying something different. So, and I also think that we've managed to recreate a few minutes there so people can get back on time. You were running a couple of minutes late, so that was great. So thank you, Diana, for your comment there as well. I'm happy to have shared my story with. It's always a little somehow, even if you don't see everybody, it's always nice to feel that there were some people listening at the end. Right, let me pop these links in. There we go. So here's some links there to connect with me on LinkedIn, or excuse me, find my book, or if you want tips, sign up to my newsletter. So good. Well, I wish everybody well and a good afternoon session. I hope to see you in some of those sessions, and thank you very much for trying this experiment with me. I hope you also enjoyed the session.
Great. Thank you, Jane. And I think you set a good example, because we ended the session after 55 minutes, so we have 5 minutes for a break.
Yes, great. Well, it was yes, excellent idea, wasn't it? Yep, you got that magic 5 minutes to recharge.
Perfect.
Good.
Great.
Oh,
thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I need a. It's amazing how talking is. Yeah. So thank you. I'm glad everything worked on the technology, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you a bit more this afternoon as well. I'll jump out of here now.
Bye.
Bye.